Welcome to the Airgun Show. In this week's episode I've got a few tips that I hope will help you to shoot a bit more accurately. But before that, I'm targeting backyard rats by daylight and under the cover of darkness. Right, I'm out on a rat shoot with a bit of a difference this evening. Rather than being on a farm as usual, we're in a garden and there do appear to be quite a few rats here. The situation is that there's a pretty overgrown pond at the bottom of the garden, and on the other side of that is a farm where they're rearing turkeys. So if you hear any funny noises, it's turkeys and not Nicky. I think the majority of the rats are living in the banks of the pond, but inevitably they've been attracted into this garden by the bird feeders, and some of them now seem to be resident here. Now the rats here are actually pretty bold, and that's not surprising because they're just fairly accustomed to human disturbance with people pottering around the garden. The only snag is that parts of the garden are pretty overgrown, and that makes it difficult to really pinpoint the rats and get consistently clear shots at them. So what I've done is to ask the owners to stop feeding the birds, and I've set up feeders of my own in the aim of creating areas of attraction. And all I've done is simply put out 2 squirrel feeders, the sort of feeders that I'd usually use to create feeding stations for grey squirrels. Rather than putting them up in trees, I've got them down on the ground in front of the bank where I've got a nice safe backstop, about 15 metres, each of them are about 15 metres from where I'm sat, and they've been filled with cut maize for over a week now, and the rats seem to have really homed in on them. So much so that they've actually been out and about feeding on them since we've been here, so they're not afraid to be out and about during daylight. The airgun that I'm using tonight is my FX Dreamline Classic, which I just think is a beautiful looking airgun. Now this one is a 177 in sub 12 foot-pounds, which is just about perfect for backyard ratting. Now optics wise, I have paired it with the Sightmark Wraith Mini, which I've been using a lot recently. It's a really nice compact day and night scope, very simple to use. The great thing being that it also runs in full colour by day, so hopefully I can capture some of the action in colour before we switch over to night vision later on. Now I've had to use sports match adapter mounts to get the Picatinny attachment connected to the dovetail rail on the FX Dreamline. That's lifted the scope a little bit, but in fact it's turned out to be a good thing because it's given me enough clearance to use the high capacity magazine without that fouling. That's the kit. As I said, the rats have already been on the move, so I'm going to stop talking and we'll see if we can shoot a few. Well, went out of the bush there. Now, the bank of the pond was still up behind it, so it was a nice safe shot, but we've not been here long and we've already had quite a few shots. I mean, this is some of the best daytime ratting that I've had for a little while. That was a very poorly looking rat. They do have a couple of cats here, so I'm not sure whether it had been attacked in the past, but whatever it was, it didn't look well. Well, there is another one. Now it is starting to get a bit gloomy now, so I think what we're going to do, I'm going to switch the Wraith over to night vision, and we'll also turn the main video cameras over to night vision. We've already shot half a dozen or so rats, so it will be very interesting to see just how much activity there is after it gets properly dark. That was a small one, only looked to be about half grown. Now, shots have been coming thick and fast since it got dark, and I've got to say, there are more rats in this garden than I'd expected. Well, it has finally started to slow down a bit, but I'm not surprised because I've shot more than a dozen rats, and I do really hope that that is going to start to make a bit of an impression on them here. I'm going to make that the last one because it's about 11:30 now, and obviously I need to get these shots picked up and disposed of and get away so the owners of the house can lock up their garden and go to bed. But what I'm going to do before I leave is to refill those feeders, because I am convinced that there are still at least a few more rats to be had here, so I'll be back again for another go at them.
Hunting we will go.
The Sightmark Wraith doing the absolute business again there by daylight and in complete darkness. And don't forget, the new 4K Ultra version is now out, and you can find out more about that on the Scott Country website. Next up, a few pointers to help keep you on target. We get asked a lot of questions by people who want to know what they can do to shoot more accurately with their airgun. So I thought I'd share a few tips on what I do to improve precision. And the first one is to experiment with different pellet types, because different airguns shoot better with different pellets. Now, unfortunately, even airguns that rolled off the same production line have different pellets that suit their barrel. So you can't just ask somebody, what gun have you got, what pellets do you use? You really do have to experiment with different ammo. Now, rather than forking out on tins and tins of 500 pellets that won't all get used, it's a good idea to ask a friend or friends maybe to lend you some pellets to try, or even buy a sample pack. My next piece of advice on ammo is to try to stick with trusted brands and don't be fooled by gimmicky designs that make claims of massively improved penetration or expansion. As a general rule of thumb, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Now, it's no secret that field target shooters and HFT shooters tend to get the best results with quality domed pellets. So it stands to reason that they're very likely to be the ones that will give you the best results in the field. Barrel cleaning is another subject that tends to crop up whenever somebody talks about airgun accuracy. Now, I've got to admit that I hardly ever clean the barrels of my airguns. I've got guns that are more than 10 years old and they have never had a barrel clean, simply because they haven't needed it. However, if you do notice a sudden decline in accuracy, it could well be because your barrel's starting to get fouled up with too much lead, and therefore it will benefit to clean it. Now, if you do carry out that process, you need to remember that it takes a few shots to go through the barrel to re-lead it, for the groups to tighten up again and for accuracy to return. And also make sure you use the correct kit for the job. Optics can make a real difference to airgun accuracy, and my advice is to try to buy the best sights that you can sensibly afford. Now, I think too many people spend an absolute fortune on a top-end airgun and then try to pair it with really cheap optics, and that makes no sense at all. Now, another thing, once you have settled on the sight that you want to use with your airgun, treat yourself to a decent set of scope mounts, because the last thing you want is a weak link between your airgun and your sights. My next piece of advice is to take supported shots whenever you can in the field, especially if you shoot a PCP, which shouldn't experience any zero shift when you shoot it rested. Now, it isn't cheating, it is simply taking advantage of an opportunity to stabilise your shots and to ensure a really clean kill. Now, if you try using a bipod or even a set of shooting sticks, you're almost certain to notice a significant improvement in accuracy, because you're taking out all those wobbles of the human body. Regular practice is really important, because nothing beats being familiar with your kit. Now, I've just talked about trying to take supported shots when you can, but don't make the mistake of only practicing from easy positions because they make your groups look good. Now, if you intend to use standing, sitting, kneeling shots in the field, And there are often times when you have no choice but to. You really do have to practice those two to ensure that you stay on the mark. My final tip is to know your limitations and to shoot within them when targeting live quarry. Now, there seems to be a bit of a fashion at the moment for trying to hunt at extreme ranges with air guns, and most of the time there really isn't any necessity for it. If you learn the basic fieldcraft skills that you need to get close to your quarry, you'll suddenly find out that getting clean kill shots becomes a heck of a lot easier. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for in this week's episode, but as ever, we'll be back again in a fortnight. And in the meantime, you can keep up with me on Instagram at Matt Manning Outdoors. Thank you for watching, and remember, if you aren't already a member of the BASC, have a look at their website and check out the benefits that you could be taking advantage of through Airgun membership.
Don't miss the award-winning Airgun Shooter magazine. It's packed with hunting features, reviews, tactics and insight to help you become an even more successful shooter. Get your copy today in shops or online.